In today's video, we're going to be initializing the Next.js application for our web app, and then we're going to be creating a GitHub repository for it, and then also link our Next.js application onto Vercel. At the end of this video, I want to be able to have a link that I can put into the browser that'll hit a website that'll be serving my Next.js application. First thing that we want to do is to create our GitHub repository. All right, so here I created a new GitHub account that doesn't have any repositories. First thing I want to do is click Create Repository, and then it's going to take you to this UI. Here, I want to call it Visual Utils. And then I want to keep it public. I don't need a README here. Git ignore. Okay. Create repository. So here, quick setup. You've done this before. You need a repository or push an existing repository from the command line. Okay, so I think this is what I want to do here. I'm going to initialize my Next.js application onto my laptop. And then once I have all the code that I need, I'm going to initialize my Git repo with my local project and then push all of that to the main line. So this is the command that I would want to use for that. So let's go ahead and use that. So this is the second time that I'm recording this video. And in the first time that I tried to set this up, I ran into a lot of configuration issues and a lot of permission issues when it comes to GitHub. So one thing I do recommend is downloading and installing the GitHub CLI. So then that command would be brew install gh. So you run that and that'll install the GitHub CLI. We can log in with GitHub through the CLI. That'll give us the permissions to whenever you want to pull stuff from GitHub or you want to push stuff onto GitHub. In order to log in with GitHub through the CLI, you type in this command, ghauth login, and then it'll tell you where do you use GitHub. So you get.com. I use HTTPS. So then now we're going to authenticate. So log in with the browser. So then here, it's going to give you a one-time code. So that it's going to open up the GitHub login on your laptop. And then here I have this account that I want to use. So I click continue, paste in that code, and then it's authorized to do all this. So I click authorize. And then now we're all good. If I go into my GitHub and then I go into my repositories, I'll see that I have my Visual Utils repository set up. And here I don't have anything added to this repository yet. What we're going to do now is we're going to create and set up the Next.js application. Once we initialize that, we can then push it onto Git. So sometimes I forget how to initialize a Next.js application. So how I usually do stuff like this is I just Google it. So how to install and initialize Next.js application. And I went through this process already once, but it's going to be the second link here. And it's going to tell you how to set up your new Next.js project. And this is going to be the command that you want to run. npx create next app. Here, I want to call it Visual Utils. I want to use TypeScript. I want to use ESLint, Tailwind, source directory, app router, turbopack, import alias. After you put in all those commands, it'll start spinning up and creating an initialized version of your Next.js app. Nice. So if I type in ls, I'll see that I have a package here called Visual Utils. So if I cd Visual Utils, now if I go into my code editor, so here I'm using cursor, go in workspace, go to Visual Utils, and then I open this. You'll see now that I have a workspace set up, and then I have my source code, I have all this. So now that we got it set up, let's see what else we want to do here. If you want to run your development server, you do npm run dev, and then you visit localhost 3000. So now if I run npm run dev, it's going to run that next dev turbopack command. And now we can see that it's hosting my web app on localhost 3000. So if I go into that, you'll see that it has the hello world Next.js application here. Something that we could do is that we can go into the page.tsx. And this is the page that's serving this portion of the code. If you copy this part and then you find it here, you see that it's right here. So if you just delete all of this here, and then you just type in something like hello world. Oh, thank you, autocomplete. This should hot reload here to see hello world. So now that we have a hello world Next.js application, what we can do is push all this code onto our GitHub repository. So then what happens is we push an existing repository from the command line, or how to Next.js app in GitHub. Next.js push to GitHub. If you have initialized your repository, do so now. Push the Next.js app to your GitHub repository. Git remote add origin, then git push origin main. Okay, here. So I want to do git remote add origin. So that's going to be this command here. So git remote add origin. And then I want to, can I just push all this? Git push origin main. Nice. What happens if I go to GitHub now? Nice. Okay, so now that you see here, I have my Next.js application. I wonder if it has the changes that I made with the hello world. Okay, no. So it has the default stuff that I created, which makes sense here, right? Because if I do git status, it shows that I modified the app/page.tsx thing, which is the hello world thing. So if I do git add, then git commit, and then I just type in message hello world. And if I do git push origin main, this should push it up to GitHub. And now if I refresh this page, you see that the hello world Nice. So now we have our GitHub repository set up. We also initialized the Next.js application. So now I think the next step is to set up our Vercel deployments for our Next.js application. So let's go ahead and do that. Vercel build and deploy, start deploying. Oh, nice. I can continue with GitHub, which is very nice. So authorize Vercel. Nice. So now we can import our Git repositories, add GitHub account. I could just do all repositories for now. That's fine. Now we can import our Next.js application, our Visual Utils app. The thing I like about Vercel is that it makes it very easy to connect your GitHub account onto Vercel. All you gotta do is just click a couple of buttons, which we just did, and it'll start deploying your application onto the internet. So I click import. Let's see what happens. I have a new project, pup projects, project name, framework, root directory. That's fine. Build output settings. We don't have to worry about these just yet. We can leave this as is. And environment variables. When we start working with APIs and environment variables and S3 and stuff like that, and you need to store environment variables on your Next.js application, this is where you go ahead and set that up for yourself. But since we're just doing a Hello World application, we can just leave this as empty, and then we click deploy. So now Next.js is deploying my application. So once Vercel has finished deploying a Next.js application, it'll give us a link to a domain that we can visit. So if I go into visualutils.vercel.app, we see that we have our changes here with Hello World. And if you go into your GitHub repository and you click on this check mark here, because you connected your GitHub repository onto Vercel, it'll give you a notification of when it has finished deploying for that specific Git push that you did. Now you can visit it and see that we have a link here. And this is why using Next.js with Vercel and GitHub is super powerful, because all we had to do was click a couple of buttons and we were able to connect our Next.js application that's hosted on our GitHub with Vercel. And then Vercel handles all the deployments for you. Right, so here I made a change to our Next.js application. And if I go onto localhost, you see that hello world, this change should be in Vercel. But this is on localhost here. So if I refresh this page here, you see that the production deployment doesn't see these changes. So what we can do very quickly is we can push this code here. Git commit test Vercel cd git push origin main. So now I pushed my code into GitHub. So if you go back to our code repository, refresh, you'll see here that we just recently pushed that change here, right? With that hello world, this should change in Vercel deployment. And if you look at this guy here, pending, if you click on this, you can see the details of this current deployment on Vercel. So now if we visit our domain here, we see the new changes being deployed here. Hello world, this change should be in Vercel deployment with that link here. So now that we have Vercel deployment set up, we have a really good workflow of building our changes locally on our laptop, pushing our code, and then Vercel listening onto that Git push and deploying your new changes onto production. So now when we develop and ship out new features, we have a really good workflow of getting all those changes to production for our users to see. At the beginning of this video, we started off with nothing, and then we created our GitHub repository. We then set up our Next.js application and then pushed all that code onto our GitHub repository. We then created a Vercel account by linking our GitHub account, and then we imported this repository onto Vercel. And then with a click of a button, we were able to deploy all of our Next.js code onto a domain that we can hit. So with all this set up, you can start developing new features and get into the fun stuff of all the code that we need to write out. So with that, I hope you learned something new, and I'll see you in the next one.